Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. In a span of a week, one city after another has fallen into the hands of the anti-Assad rebels in Syria. The southern city of Dara, that has been dubbed as the cradle of the Syrian revolution, the place where the anti-Assad uprising began in 2011, has now been wrested by another group of rebels, after the Syrian forces reportedly struck a deal for safe passage and surrendered the city that is just 100 kilometers south of Damascus. In the north, the Turkish-backed rebels, led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, have made some spectacular gains in a lightning offensive since the 27th of November, the very day when Israel had agreed for a ceasefire in Lebanon. Never in the civil war have the al-Assad forces lost so many key cities in such a short span of time. The fact that Turkey was one of the lead backers of this uprising was not a secret. But now, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has laid out his cards in the open, lauding the gains made by the rebel forces that have gone well beyond what anyone, including even the rebels, had expected. Erdogan has said that the target is now Damascus. When the Syrian civil war had broken out in 2011, the then American President Barack Obama had famously or infamously said that Assad must go. But the entry of the Russians in 2015 had turned the tide of the war and had saved the government of Bashar al-Assad for another decade. But this time round, the al-Assad forces are looking weaker, and the support from Russia and Iran appears to be a lot more hesitant. So the question is this: can Bashar al-Assad survive again, or will the rebels backed by the regional and world powers capture the historic city of Damascus? Our next report gets you the details. When statues are brought down and when the rebels combine preparation with opportunity, the destiny of a nation can be remolded. And Syria, at this current juncture, stands on one such precipice. This video from the 30th of November gives you a glimpse of what unfolded in Aleppo as the rebels tore down the statue of Basil, the brother of Bashar al-Assad, from atop a high horse. Similar such scenes were witnessed in other cities as well that were captured by the rebel forces. In the city of Hama, that was captured by the rebels on the 5th of December, the rebels brought down the statue of Hafiz al-Assad, the father of the current ruler Bashar al-Assad, who himself had ruled over Syria as its president from 1971 until his death in the year 2000. There are pitched gun battles that are taking place between the rebel forces led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, who are fighting with some top-notch Western weapons, and the underprepared Syrian soldiers who look woefully outgunned and outmaneuvered. The lightning offensive by the rebels in a span of a week has brought a large amount of the Syrian territory under the control of the rebels. Syria's second largest city, Aleppo, was the first to fall to the rebels, followed by Hama, and the rebels are now knocking on the gates of the centrally located and the strategic city of Homs. In the south, another set of rebels are reported to have wrested control of the city of Dara. And the intentions of the rebels could not be more clearer.
From this platform, I call on the Minister of Defense of the regime's government and all of the remnants of the criminal regime's militias to listen to the voice of reason and learn from the fate of the officers and militias who preceded them in Aleppo and Hama, and to defect from this gang that has linked the fate of an entire people to the fate of the members of the ruling family, or else await your own fate.
Russia, which had managed to turn the tide of the war in 2015, has carried out airstrikes on certain rebel positions, hampering their advance. But a lack of ground preparedness, the inability of the Hezbollah to field its fighters and to blunt the rebel attacks, and a certain reluctance by the Iraqi militia groups to come to the rescue of Bashar al-Assad's forces has meant that the Russian strikes haven't had the same impact as they did last time. Russia too is occupied in the Ukrainian war theatre, where Joe Biden, in his days as the lame duck president, is climbing up the escalatory ladder with long-range missiles. So even as the rebel forces that are closely linked to the Al-Qaeda and other terror networks and backed by regional and global powers rejoice on the streets, the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad insists its withdrawal from Aleppo and Hama is merely tactical, and that the rebels will be driven out in a grinding counter-offensive that can be expected in the days to come.
I affirm that what happened in the city of Hama today is a temporary tactical measure. Our forces remain positioned around the city of Hama, fully prepared and ready to carry out their national and constitutional duties.
Videos of the US Air Force's A-10 Warthog attack planes bombing targets in Deir ez-Zor started going viral. And soon, this was confirmed by the Pentagon in the clearest indicator that the United States too is at least knee-deep in this war.
This morning, U.S. Central Command forces successfully destroyed several weapon systems in the vicinity of military support site Euphrates in Syria that included 3 truck-mounted multiple rocket launchers, a T-64 tank, and mortars that presented a clear and imminent threat to U.S. and coalition forces. The self-defense strike occurred after the mobile multiple rocket launchers fired rockets that landed in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates, and mortars were fired towards U.S. forces.
From the outset of the Syrian civil war in 2011, the American leadership had tried to oust Bashar al-Assad from Damascus.
I think that Assad is going to have to leave in order for the country to stop the bloodletting and for all the parties involved to be able to move forward in a non-sectarian.
Bashar al-Assad had managed to survive the last uprising, but this time round, the future of Syria and that of Assad looks ever more uncertain. Georgia, the South Caucasus nation of about 3.7 million people, has been plunged into chaos since the 28th of November after the governing Georgian Dream Party announced suspension of EU membership talks until 2028. The nightly demonstrations since then have been met with a very heavy-handed response from the authorities. More than 330 protesters have been arrested, with many allegedly being beaten in detention. Now, several opposition party headquarters have also been raided, and the opposition leaders have been arrested. Despite international condemnation, the Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze has refused to back down, accusing the protesters of spreading what he describes as liberal fascism. Our next report gets you more details.
The Georgian capital of Tbilisi has been in turmoil since the ruling Georgian Dream Party claimed victory in the disputed October 26th parliamentary election. The controversial election was widely viewed as a referendum on Georgia's European Union aspirations. Critics of the increasingly authoritarian government accuse it of turning its back on the West and of leading the country back into Russia's orbit. On the 28th of November, the Georgian Dream Party announced that it was suspending the country's bid to start talks on joining the European Union until 2028, triggering a fresh wave of protests. Several demonstrators, including journalists, have alleged being beaten after being detained by the security forces. Georgian journalist Guram Rogava, who accused the riot police of employing intimidatory tactics, was covering a protest live in Tbilisi early on the 29th of November when he was targeted directly by the police.
I was told it was a miracle that I can move my hands and talk because the injuries I sustained at the place gave me almost zero chance of survival. I have covered many protests since 2002, and this time it was apparent that we, the journalists, were special targets. It was clear that they were deliberately attacking media representatives. This is the policy of Georgian Dream. The government is such a state that, for some reason, its survival instinct dictates the need to intimidate the media.
Georgian riot police have used water cannons and tear gas in a bid to disperse demonstrators, who threw fireworks at police officers and built barricades on Tbilisi's central boulevard. More than 100 people have been treated for injuries following violent clashes with riot police. Reportedly, after a strident briefing from Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze, authorities started going after opposition leaders. On Wednesday, 48-year-old Nika Gvaramia, a lawyer and media manager turned politician from one of 4 opposition groups, was detained by police in the capital Tbilisi after being knocked to the ground and falling unconscious. But Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze struck a defiant tone, calling the arrests of opposition figures and reported searches at the offices of various organizations as more prevention than repression.
I could not call it repression. It is more prevention than repression. Regarding the connection, it is a fact. One thing is confirmed: people were systematically supplied with pyrotechnics and other means by the relevant political forces. This is absolutely clear, and it lies in the palm of the hand.
In another major fallout, several ambassadors and the deputy foreign minister of Georgia have resigned over the decision to suspend European Union accession talks for 4 years. But Prime Minister Irakli Kobakidze has refused to budge from his position and has instead escalated the feud with pro-EU opposition groups demanding a rerun of the disputed elections.
We will do everything necessary to completely eradicate liberal fascism in Georgia. This process has already begun. These recent developments mark the start of the end of liberal fascism in Georgia.
This kind of language is eerily reminiscent of what is used by the Kremlin in Russia to suppress dissent and target its political opponents. Though Georgia's bid for European Union membership is enshrined in its constitution and supported by around 80% of the population, the tough stance adopted by the ruling Georgian Dream Party smacks of betrayal. One can only hope that these nights of protests culminate in a dawn of a bright new future for the enraged demonstrators.
On the 6th of December, Tehran successfully launched a satellite into orbit using its Simorgh rocket. Furthermore, the Islamic Republic claimed that the payload that weighed approximately about 300 kilograms was heavier than any of its previous successful launches. Though there has been no immediate independent confirmation of the launch success, the announcement comes as heightened tensions have gripped the Middle East over Israel's war in the Gaza Strip and a very fragile ceasefire in Lebanon. The United Nations and the Western powers are of the opinion that the potential military implications of Iran's space advancements is a cause for serious concern to them. Our next report gets you the details.
Iranian state media reported on Friday that the Simorgh, a satellite-carrying rocket, delivered an orbital propulsion system and 2 research devices to a 250-mile orbit above Earth. The launch took place at the Imam Khomeini spaceport in Semnan province, which is considered the hub of Iran's civilian space program. The orbital propulsion system, which allows Iran to adjust the satellite's orbit, is considered a significant step toward achieving geosynchronous satellite positioning, where satellites are placed in orbital periods that match the Earth's rotation. This was a long-standing goal for Tehran in achieving its space ambitions.
The feature of this launch is that it has higher capability than the previous launch. In the future, with the development and improvement that is being carried out on the satellite carrier Simorgh, this weight can be increased up to 500 kilograms.
In the past, the United States has criticized Iran's satellite launches, stating that they are in violation of United Nations Security Council resolutions. These resolutions, which expired last year in October, urged Tehran to refrain from activities involving ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. Interestingly, the technology used in space launch vehicles, including Iran's Simorgh rocket, is similar to that required for intercontinental ballistic missiles or ICBMs. Both rely on advanced propulsion, guidance, and re-entry systems. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, though exhibiting a willingness to negotiate sanctions relief with Western powers, has not clarified his administration's strategy regarding space exploration. Additionally, since the collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal, Iran has reportedly enriched uranium close to weapons-grade levels. The International Atomic Energy Agency has repeatedly warned that Tehran possesses enough material for several nuclear weapons should it decide to produce them. Tehran has vehemently rejected these allegations and repeatedly asserted that its space and nuclear programs serve peaceful purposes. Notwithstanding the intentions with the claims of a successful space launch, Tehran has once again stirred up a hornet's nest.
The Mexican state of Sinaloa has been racked by violence ever since the two factions of the Sinaloa drug cartel declared war on each other almost about 3 months ago. Subsequently, more than 200 people have disappeared and scores of others have been murdered. The spike in murders and disappearances has taken some sheen of Mexico's first female head of the state, Claudia Sheinbaum's first few months in office. On the 4th of December, Sheinbaum, adopting a pretty tough stance, made tackling the violence in Sinaloa her topmost priority. She's also lauded the security forces for making Mexico's biggest fentanyl drug bust so far. And our next report gets you more details.
A wave of drug cartel-related violence has been sweeping across the Mexican state of Sinaloa for almost 3 months now. The feud erupted following the arrest of one of the world's most powerful drug lords, Ismael El Mayo Zambada, by US federal agents in El Paso, Texas in the month of July. Zambada's followers, known as Los Mayos, alleged that he was betrayed by the son of the infamous founder of the Sinaloa cartel, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, and have turned on members of his faction known as Los Chapitos. The bloody battle for the control of the Sinaloa cartel began in September, when as many as 144 intentional homicides were reported. The figure swelled to 188 in October and was 175 in the month of November. Sensing the urgency of the situation, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum dispatched her security chief to Sinaloa state in a bid to quell the violence.
There have been high-profile detentions in the state. People who caused violence were arrested. This will be resolved, but not overnight. It's a constant work for the security cabinet. There's an important deployment of the national defense in Culiacan, and there's an important deployment of the Navy in Mazatlan.
Claudia Sheinbaum, who was sworn in as Mexico's first female head of state on 1st of October, had promised while campaigning to maintain the approach of her predecessor in office, who had avoided direct confrontations with the cartel. She had initially ruled out a more militaristic approach, but growing criticism within her own country and pressure from US President-elect Donald Trump has compelled her to adopt a zero-tolerance approach. Trump wants Mexico to do substantially more to curb the trafficking to the US of the synthetic opioid fentanyl. On Wednesday, President Sheinbaum was effusive in her praise for the security forces for making Mexico's biggest fentanyl bust to date.
Esta es una investigación que venía desde hace tiempo.
This is an investigation that had been ongoing for some time, and yesterday it yielded these results. It is the largest seizure of fentanyl pills ever made. The consumption of a fentanyl addict over the course of a year is like a little packet of sugar. So this is the size of the doses used. So thinking about a ton of fentanyl, we're talking about more than 20 million doses.
Reportedly, the fentanyl pills seized at 2 properties in Sinaloa are worth $394 million. Interestingly, news of the massive fentanyl bust came just over a week after Trump threatened to impose 25% tariffs on goods coming from Mexico and Canada on day one of his presidency. Barely 2 months into her term, Mexican President Sheinbaum has delivered the first major blow to the drug cartel. The important question is, will she be able to bring an end to the intensifying violence in the state of Sinaloa?
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.